Another designated hitter is off the board for the Toronto Blue Jays, and their pursuit to fill that position just got a little bit harder. Joc Pederson signed a deal with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who seem to be getting a lot better this offseason, and the Blue Jays have been standing pat. So I'll break that down and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. What's going on, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Now, Joc Pederson was another option that we've been breaking down over the past couple of weeks here, Nick. He looked like a guy that could fill that position that Brandon Belt was occupying last year. Maybe not someone that you want playing against lefties every day, but definitely could mash righties. A bit younger than Brandon Belt as well, so there was some upside there, and he had some decent power numbers last year before getting injured. Could get on base, doesn't play any defense really, so he was going to be a primary DH, and now he signed a one-year deal with the Arizona Diamondbacks. What does this mean now for the Toronto Blue Jays, Nick? It means that there's one less option for them to fill that designated hitter position, and we don't know who it's going to be. All signs are pointing towards Jorge Soler. Justin Turner's got to be in the mix as well. JD Martinez. Obviously, they must still be in on Cody Bellinger, you would think, but the market is really starting to dwindle down here, and the Blue Jays have yet to really set in stone who they want as their next guy. And who's it going to be? Like, can they even get any of those guys? That's going to be the big question.
3 days ago, we were on video talking about how it's okay, the market is still perfectly fine, and now 3 days later, two of the big guys are gone. And not only, if Justin Turner went, it would be a bit different, but he is the two biggest ones, aside from a couple of the other ones, are gone. Before you do it, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. 73% of you guys aren't subscribed. We're on the road to 12,000. Now, Peter, you mentioned it. Significant development for the Blue Jays. Jorge Soler would instantly emerge as the preferred target if Peterson signs with Arizona, and he ultimately did. Signed a one-year deal with the Diamondbacks. And there was a time there, Peter, where this seemed like the inevitable choice for the Blue Jays before reports started to surface that he might have been going to a West Coast team. Peterson's a very good player. He's a lefty. The Jays, we know, prefer a left-handed hitter. And he's off the board, and now all reports are highlighting regarding Jorge Soler, and I'll show you one here. You're not going to be able to read this most likely, but I'll quickly read it out for you. It's from John Heyman, and he says, Soler, I do think will go fairly soon. I like Toronto or Arizona at this point, but there have been other teams, including Boston, in on Soler. And Peter, this was before, it was 2 days ago, before Arizona signed Peterson. That leaves the Toronto Blue Jays as the stone-cold favorite to land Soler. And apologies for the small screenshot.
That might be the smallest screenshot in Jays Digest history, and let's hope it doesn't happen again. You got to get back on the ball, Nick. What's going on there? But yeah, the same thing for me as Rhys Hoskins. I think Rhys Hoskins was on the bottom of my pecking order, and I didn't really have him too high on the list when it comes to filling that DH position. And Joc Pederson was more of the same. I had him probably third behind JD Martinez and Jorge Soler. So, look, it's not that big of a loss, but now you're banking on one of those three remaining guys that we've been talking about wanting to sign with your organization. And that's been a challenge this offseason. It really has. We know that the Jays have gone out and signed free agents like Kevin Gausman, George Springer, Hyun-Jin Ryu, Chris Bassett. They've had success in free agency, but for whatever reason, this offseason, it hasn't come to fruition. They haven't been able to get any of those guys. Now, two of them are off the board, Joc Pederson and Rhys Hoskins. Good contracts as well. Could have been affordable for the Blue Jays. Could have been a stopgap option before someone else was ready to come and take the reins. But now you don't have that anymore. So you could turn your attention to Jorge Soler, who's probably going to command 3-4 years at $15 to $20 million per, or JD Martinez, who's probably going to get a big time amount of money for a 1 or 2 year deal just because of the way that he's performed over the course of his entire career. So it's really getting concerning now, and it was concerning when Rhys Hoskins signed because there was one less option, and now it's even more concerning because Joc Pederson stayed in the West Coast, and there's one less option for the Blue Jays to make this team better.
I'm not going to say I'm scared yet because the two guys that we wanted the most since the end of this regular season, which is Jorge Soler and JD Martinez, are still available. And we know we've been talking about Jorge Soler a ton and how good he has been. He is the guy that we kind of want, but I understand why some Jays fans would have preferred a guy like Rhys Hoskins, a guy like all these guys, Joc Pederson even. And then more reports are starting to come out, and this one is from Jeff Passan. Now, this was yesterday, and it said basically that multiple executives interested in signing Boris's top client agreed that none of the four is likely to sign, before the calendar turns February and said it wouldn't surprise him if they remain unsigned, which is not a great sign for anyone really. But then it said the teams interested in these Boris clients are the Giants, the Blue Jays, among others. So I don't know. And again, I don't believe Jorge Soler is a Boris client. This is more so Matt Chapman, Cody Bellinger, that type of those players. But Peter, if we're waiting till February, are we going to get to a point where spring training is starting and we don't have one of any of these guys? Matt Chapman is still in the market. Like, it's getting wild. Now we are seeing some dominoes start to fall. Obviously not Boris clients, but a lot of the DH dominoes are falling, and maybe this is the time where Ross Atkins says, okay, enough's enough. We're going to give Soler that extra 10, 15 million, however much. Who knows what the difference is between the gaps here. But you'd think if they were super close, the deal would have been done by now.
I don't know how much I read into that, though, because Boris might just be holding out for the most amount of money,
Likely.
and teams might be reluctant to give Matt Chapman 125, 150 million dollars. They might be reluctant to give Cody Bellinger 200 million dollars, and for good reason. They've had some up and down seasons. They've shown a lot of inconsistency over the past few years as well. So yeah, that's a lot of money to commit to someone who you don't know what you're going to get out of on a year-to-year basis. So I understand the hesitation that a lot of teams have, but the market is not exactly loaded with stars. And in a market that isn't loaded with stars, those are two of them. Matt Chapman and Cody Bellinger are stars in different areas of the game. Of course, Matt Chapman's a defensive superstar, leaves a little bit to be desired with the bat. Cody Bellinger showed flashes of being a five-tool player last year again with the Chicago Cubs. So, yeah, it's a lot of money to give to those two guys. And, yeah, I don't read too much into it because they're trying to get the most amount of money out of these front offices. It makes sense. But you got to believe that the Blue Jays are probably in on both of them, just doing their due diligence in that sense. But the big area of concern right now is the DH position. And I would just pony up and give Jorge Soler that money because there's no one really out there that's going to make your team much better than he would, unless you get JD Martinez.
Yeah, and I don't think JD Martinez is super likely at this point. I just don't get the vibe that he's going to want to come to Toronto. But Soler,
well, we're not really hearing.
Exactly.
We're not hearing any reports, right? So it's Soler or bust, and that's pretty scary.
Yeah, and if we think about it now, Peter, I'll ask you this before we wrap up. Let's say Soler and Martinez go off the board. Where do the Jays pivot then? I guess at that point, you're probably looking at a Justin Turner type, maybe even a, dare I say, a Joey Votto type signing here. And we all love Joey Votto, but if they don't get Jorge Soler, I mean, we talked about this in similar ways, different players, obviously, with the Ohtani stuff. If they don't get Ohtani, then they have to go Bellinger or bust. Now we're kind of talking back to where we probably should have been the whole time, which is a Soler type scenario. If they don't get any of these guys, what do the Jays do? Because they really are... They're screwed, I think, if they don't get one of these big players, unless they count on major developments from Isaiah Kiner-Falefa or someone.
Yeah, I wouldn't bank on that, Nick. He's 29 years old.
Yeah.
I don't see him breaking out this season, but maybe the attention shifts to the trade market, and that's probably going to be the best bet for the Blue Jays. If they can't get anything done in free agency, they're going to have to go out and trade for someone, because if the roster is the same way as it is right now on opening day, then we're in trouble. We're in trouble, and I'm not even putting that lightly. I think we are in dire trouble if this lineup just stays the same and there are no upgrades made at third base, fourth outfield position, or even DH for that matter. So yeah, the clock is ticking. I mean, spring training is still about a month away, so there's time. You got to have those guys in the lineup by opening day. So you still have a couple of months to get something done here. And hopefully Ross Atkins is working those phones to no end, because it's been a really quiet offseason. A lot of Blue Jay fans are starting to get worried. Nothing has really moved at a quick pace. We've been waiting for a lot of teams to do something significant, so the Blue Jays aren't alone in that regard. But Juan Soto is off the board, and he's in the AL East now. Shohei Ohtani just made the Dodgers one of the greatest collections of talent ever, so you got to match that. You got to try and make your team the best possible squad that you can and go from there.
Yeah, and let us know how to wrap it up. Let us know, are you getting worried that another target is off the board? But that'll wrap it up. If you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and we will see you tomorrow.